there is a lot of good news around. No, not about virus variants and mutants and all of this, which the media has been quite obsessed with, despite very little data to show there is any cause for extra concern regarding whether vaccines will work and the like, but actual real-world data about one of the first vaccines to get approved, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Let's talk about this with Tim Spector. He's Professor of Genetic Epidemiology and Principal Investigator of the ZOE Covid Symptom Study app that has tracked COVID symptoms since the beginning of this pandemic. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. There's an awful lot of doom and gloom, understandably, when we have variants and words like mutant, which scare the living daylights out of most people. But a lot of that is based on fears, no evidence that something isn't going to be a bigger problem, lots of concerns, still worries for people about how this pandemic is going to roll out. But in terms of actual real data, proper factual data that we've actually seen, there is so much good news about in terms of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, isn't there? In terms of its efficacy, not just preventing deaths in those who've taken it, preventing hospitalizations in those who take it, but also that it does appear to prevent transmission in 2/3 of cases. Is that the game changer we've been looking for?
I think, as you said, it's a lot of good news actually around amidst some of these overhyped, I think, discussions about mutants, because in the context of everything that's happening at the moment, where we are seeing cases dropping for the last 4 weeks, where we're seeing hospital admissions down, where we're seeing deaths starting more slowly to come down. We have 10 million people vaccinated, and we know that these vaccines all work to some extent anyway. So it was just a question of how much they might be restricted by some of these new variants or not. But I think people seem to have been very worried that these vaccines wouldn't work at all against some of these new variants, which would have been a problem, but absolutely nowhere has that been shown. And the only real worrying data of any concern is that there was a slight 10% reduction in efficacy in these trials of the South African variant. That was done in very small numbers of people, and 10% in the context of generally a sort of 70 to 90% efficacy is not really the major factor. So I think we mustn't lose our heads over this discussion about the variants. We've got to still concentrate on the basics, which is that if you can get, the virus under control, it doesn't really matter which variant it is. It won't be able to cause major problems in our hospitals and major disaster. So we need to really focus back again on the things that do work in suppressing this, which is picking up cases early. It's about people self-isolating. It's about recognizing all the 20 symptoms, not ignoring 30% of people who have other symptoms. It's all these kind of things that we've sort of lost our way on a bit because of all this excitement about these subtle details about the vaccines.
Yeah, I mean, such sensible, calm words trying to deal with the overhyping. I think when people hear the word mutant, they're sort of, horrified. I was mentioning on the show yesterday, I'd seen a report earlier that morning on Sky News where a vox pop was done, and one man said, well, of course, it's a new variant, it's a mutant, it's a completely different virus, so the vaccine won't work. And this was just left as if this was remotely true. I mean, there was just no aspect of what he said that was true, and it wasn't sort of questioned or I mean, frankly, I'd have thought it was. I mean, certainly if I reported things that are inappropriately on this show, I would expect to have an Ofcom complaint made about it. But this is the thing, we do need to keep things in perspective. We know that, I mean, I'm not saying COVID is like flu. They are different viruses with different risks, etc. But every single year we have a new flu jab that is made to deal with the latest mutations and which is the dominant flu bug at that time, where we often get that information from what's happened in the southern hemisphere ahead of us. And we will, in the future, be adapting our vaccines to the various different new variations in the COVID virus, aren't we? We are now living with a new endemic virus. It's going to be with us for a very long time to come, possibly forever, like common cold or COVID, sorry, or flu. And we are going to adapt the vaccines, and the ability to make a vaccine in a matter of months would show that it's not going to be beyond the wit of man to adapt a vaccine to any new variant anyway.
Absolutely. And, I think we do need to change this discussion to get people's mindset around this, that, we're not going to get zero rates of this virus or completely crush the deadly mutant, or whatever you want to call it. We're going to get levels down to the sort of things that we see every year with flu, that some years are worse than others, that doesn't shut our society down, that we accept we're going to have to be vaccinated with boosters, and that some years they won't work as well as others. And that's exactly what happened. Some years we have a vaccine to the flu and it really doesn't work at all, but we only find out really at the end of the winter that it didn't work, because that's what we were doing. And so I think we do need to be sensible, but the reality is we are now getting good data, and I know many of your listeners do log on to the ZOE Symptom Study app, and we've now got data on 280,000 people who've had a vaccine, who've logged their vaccine with us and their symptoms, and we're looking at how many of them are getting reinfected. And the news is that after 2 weeks, and the first 2 weeks you're really vulnerable to getting infected, but after 2 weeks it drops by half.
Yep.
And this is sort of across the board. It's a really sort of dramatic drop we're seeing. So we're seeing that just a single dose, and we've been looking at healthcare workers who are high risk, that 50% reduction after 2 weeks, you think about the 10 million people that have been done, that's going to have a very major effect in reducing this virus. Now, we're never going to get to 100% protection. But if the whole country has 50% protection, that's going to be a huge protective, cloak for the whole country. So, yes, some people will still get infected, but it looks like we can reduce their transmission, which, to be honest, most scientists always all believed anyway.
Yes, I thought it was quite bizarre that people thought that was unlikely. It was always more likely than unlikely, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was mainly whipped up by the media, really, to sort of, or people just trying to say we be more careful. I
hate to tell you, I think it was whipped up by the chief scientific advisor and chief scientific officer, who were trying to tell us we had to stay in our homes even though people had been vaccinated.
Quite possibly, but the reality is that most of these vaccines, if you are immune, they don't work. Looking at other diseases, generally you don't get transmission if you've had the vaccine or you've had the disease, and it's as simple as that. So we are seeing good results, around, and I think everything we've been seeing this week is really reassuring to people.
Absolutely.